Hey there everybody, my name is Ben Stapley and my desire is to help you create and capture moving and memorable moments. Today I wanted to give you 9 principles to process communication requests within a church setting. That being said, if you work outside of a church setting, these principles will still apply to you. The reason I wanted to address this topic is because processing communication and creative requests within the church can at times feel like navigating a minefield. This is a very collaborative process which involves limited resources, conflicting agendas, and a super subjective subject matter. So these principles are designed to help ensure that artists and communicators are empowered. And in the end, this will help your church accomplish its vision. The first principle is to identify decision-making guidelines. This isn't a fun principle, but it is incredibly valuable and oftentimes overlooked. And that's why I put it first. You need to take time with your leadership to come up with the guidelines or framework by which you process communication and creative requests. I say leadership because you need their investment in this critical conversation. Receiving their investment at the front end will help you reap rewards at the back end. If you get the leadership to buy in at the beginning, then you'll have their backing when it comes time for implementation. The 3 guidelines behind video production at Liquid Church are a large target audience, wide distribution, and deep value. If a request has these 3 guidelines, then we usually greenlight it. If the request doesn't, then we usually don't move forward with it. The second principle is to communicate the decision-making guidelines. After you've identified the principles, they need to be communicated. It is best to email these out to your partners with the leadership attached. This way everybody knows that everybody knows. After you send the email, make sure to sit down with your partners to talk with them face-to-face through the guidelines. Another reason you need to communicate the guidelines is because information vacuums always get filled, and they don't get filled with positive truths. No, they get filled with negative assumptions. Some of those assumptions are, you aren't doing this video because our ministry isn't important, or it's just because you don't like me. Communicating the guidelines fills the information vacuum with positive truths instead of negative assumptions. After you've communicated these, then people will feel treated fairly. The third principle is to determine resource allocation. Determine resource allocation. How many resources, time, energy, money, does each department or ministry receive from the creative teams? There's only so much pie, so knowing how it gets cut up will really help. Again, you need to determine this with your leadership. This will bring clarity across your departments or ministries. If this vital step is skipped, it will foster competition across your departments. Then the loudest department, not the department that is being allocated the resources, will receive them. And you don't want your departments competing against each other for resources because it creates a lot of sideways and even backwards energy and movement. The fourth principle is partners, not clients. Partners, not clients. Move away from calling those you serve clients and towards calling them partners. Throughout the video, you've heard me using the term partners, and that's because clients communicates a cold relationship based mainly on professionalism. In this relationship model, the artist is the resource to accomplish a task. They're there just simply to click a mouse. Partner communicates a collaborative relationship based on teamwork. In this model, the artist feels honored and looks to honored. When you move to calling those you serve partners and not clients, you start to build a solid relationship foundation that will weather the storms that ministry can throw at you. The fifth principle is whenever you add, you have to subtract. Whenever you add, you have to subtract. If your church decides to add an area of focus for an upcoming year, discipleship, evangelism, clowns, you name it, you need to subtract this focus from last year. You need to take something off your plate. If you don't apply this principle, then every department will naturally feel they should receive the same treatment from the past year. In turn, this will overload your creative teams and burn them out. So for the sake of the teams you lead, whenever you add, you need to subtract. The pie chart only has so many slices, so manage them well. The sixth principle is often one that gets overlooked, and it is this quarter or never. This quarter or never. If you don't have time for a creative request in the next 3 months, then you won't have time for it in the following 3 months. If higher priorities supersede a request now, then it will trump it later as well. If you are a people pleaser or a partner pleaser, this can be a hard principle to implement because you want to please the partner. But the partner would rather hear this harsh reality than the false promise of, we'll get to it later. If you don't have the time to accomplish a video in the next 3 months, then you will not have time to accomplish it afterwards. The seventh principle is to right-size the request. Right-size the request. This is a common principle, but it needs to be stated in case your creative team doesn't currently apply it. Depending on your workload, you may have to scale down or even decline the request. Whenever you have to say no, look for another way to say yes. Instead of producing a video, hey, maybe create a graphic instead. Instead of offering an announcement, maybe offer a Facebook post. Instead of buying a billboard, hey, maybe buy postcards. Trying to say yes and right-size the request reminds the partner that you want them to win and you want their ministry to succeed. The eighth principle is consider scaling up the request. I like this one because it helps us think about going above and beyond the request instead of pulling it back. So we need to consider when to scale down a request and when to scale it up. When interacting with a partner, avoid the temptation to consistently reduce the request. Work to add value to the partner by considering when to elaborate on ideas. Sometimes it can be a small cost to you and your team, but a large benefit to your partner. The ninth and final principle is always explain rejection. Always explain rejection. Rejection stings. It stings even worse when we don't know why we're being rejected. For those who've been rejected for a date, you can attest to this truth. When you have to reject or deny a request, make sure to explain why. When a partner understands the factors behind your decision, they will be better able to accept it. And this will help you build trust with them and with the relationship. So those are my 9 principles for processing communication requests within a church setting. Email me at benstapley@gmail.com and let me know which ones I missed. I would love to hear and learn from you. I would also love to connect with you on social media, so look me up. Ultimately, remember that you are on a team. It's not you against the constant onslaught of requests. It's you and your team trying to communicate effectively to your church and to help point them towards their loving God.